Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's Saturday afternoon, time for all the injury updates and player news across the NFL. After I'm done, I'm going to update and give you my final rankings at every position, and also make a slight change to my picks against the spread. But let's begin with the positive news. All of the healthy teams would include the Arizona Cardinals, Atlanta Falcons, Chicago Bears, Indianapolis Colts, and New York Giants. If you were planning on starting one of those offensive players, they are healthy. They're good to go. You can keep them in your lineup. In terms of injuries, we're going to start in Baltimore with Zay Flowers, who's questionable with an ankle injury. Didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, only limited on Friday. So he's a true game time decision. I'm not convinced he actually suits up. And even if he does, it's a tough matchup against Denzel Ward. He might be bad. So Flowers gets a big downgrade. I don't think he's a safe option anymore, and there has been some risk with him in general. If he's out, Rashad Bateman would be their number one receiver, but against Ward, I actually think it wouldn't change anything. You'd still see the same role for Bateman, relying on a deep touchdown to hit in order to pay off in fantasy. So good luck with him. We'll find out about Flowers 90 minutes before kickoff. Keaton Mitchell, the backup running back, has yet to play this season, but his 21-day window off of IR has been opened. He might play before week 11. He'll be back on the field soon enough. In Buffalo, Curtis Samuel is out, but kind of irrelevant. In Carolina, Andy Dalton is doubtful. He got in a car accident, injured his thumb. Bryce Young will get the start, but he's going to be without Diontae Johnston, the top receiver for the Panthers, is out, and Adam Thielen not quite ready to return off of IR, but he is practicing. He could return after the bye, though. It's possible he's not activated until week 12. Jonathan Brooks, their rookie second-round pick running back, is doubtful as well. He's been practicing limited all week. He missed only one day last week, but he's still not ready to start. He will be out for this game, but maybe he returns in week 9. The latest we'll see him will be week 10. For now, Chuba Hubbard remains the RB1 in Carolina, but with all the injuries and changes at quarterback in the offense, I worry about it. Against Denver, I don't think Chuba Hubbard gains much value. I'd still worry about him. In the rankings, I didn't really change much on Chuba. Xavier Legette, though, probably is the starting wide receiver, so he does crack the rankings. I'm not considering Mingo or Coker, though. Legette is still extremely risky. In Cincinnati, I'm very bummed about this player update. T. Higgins, questionable with a quad injury, was full Wednesday, Thursday. It happened Friday. He was limited, downgraded, now game time decision. And even if he's active, I think this is terrible news. Very risky play with T. Higgins, because if you had him on your team like I did 2 years ago, then you remember he had a hamstring injury on 2 different occasions where he was a game time decision. And pregame, he was cleared to play. He was deemed active. And after about 5-10 snaps, both times he left the field, he did not finish the game, didn't even make it to the end of the first quarter. So I'd be very worried that happens again in a contract season. Higgins has been very cautious with his health. He also missed 2 games to start the year with a hamstring injury, and this is very bad news regarding T. Higgins. So he's playing excellent. It's hard to bench him, but there's a lot of risk. I think he's just a flex play now, not a clear top 10 receiver for the Bengals. So if he's inactive, Andre Yoshivas, Jermaine Burton, maybe even Mike Gesicki get a few more targets. They do gain some value without Higgins, but it's probably just a bigger game for Jamar Chase. In Cleveland, Deshaun Watson is on IR, so that's what we were expecting. Jameis Winston is the starting quarterback, and maybe more targets are available for guys like Judy, Cedric Tillman, and even Elijah Moore. One of those receivers will step up. Going to be interesting to see who will be Winston's go-to target. But the backup running back, Jerome Ford, is out for this game. Second week in a row where Chubb is active, but Ford is not. I do not trust the backups in Cleveland. In Dallas, Brandin Cooks remains on IR, so Tolbert is that number 2 receiver. But kicker Brandon Aubrey will play. He's active. He didn't practice this week because of jury duty, but he's going to be fine for the game. In Denver, Josh Reynolds remains on IR, so Cortland Sutton is their top receiver. Put up a bagel last week. I think he'll be better against the Panthers. The Saints were a tough matchup. In Detroit, he's not injured, but Jameson Williams has not challenged his suspension. He did not appeal it, and he will miss 2 games. He'll be back in week 10. For now, a few more targets available for Laporta, Khalif Raymond, and Tim Patrick. But in general, I think Goff loses a little value without that deep threat on the field. In Green Bay, Luke Musgrave remains on IR for a while, so Tucker Kraft is a legit streamer once again, but Rookie running back Marshawn Lloyd not ready to return off of IR. He's yet to practice. So the backup remains Emmanuel Wilson. And in a potential blowout victory against Jacksonville, it's possible they give him a lot of touches. If they're up big, I think they make sure Jacobs is healthy for the Lions game next week. Emmanuel Wilson might get a lot of work. In Houston, Nico Collins is on IR. There have been no setbacks for him, so he will come back when eligible, and that will be week 10. He will be out for another 2 weeks. So in general, it's just a downgrade to CJ Stroud. The receivers have yet to really step up behind him. In Indianapolis, I already mentioned they're all healthy, but just to be official about it, Jonathan Taylor is active. He is good to go. Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson are no longer handcuff options. In Jacksonville, Travis Etienne is questionable with a hamstring injury, limited all week in practice for the second week in a row, but is still a game time decision. I really have no idea what his game status will be. So even if he plays, I think he's too risky to start. I think he lost his job to Bigsby, and I would rather see it before I trust it. I think Dearness Johnson could still get more touches than Etienne in this game. I really don't trust anyone other than Bigsby for the Jags in the backfield. In Kansas City, Juju Smith-Schuster is out, but they did trade for DeAndre Hopkins, so he's going to be fine. Isaiah Pacheco, though, might return as early as week 9. His timeline for return was 6 to 8 weeks, and week 8 would be the 6th week of that window. So it's possible he sits out another 2 games, but it's also possible he's back as early as week 9. Pacheco is coming back soon. In LA for the Chargers, there's a lot of injuries for their receiving core. Once again, Quentin Johnston is doubtful, not expecting him to play. He did not practice at all this week. DJ Chark is staying on IR, probably returns closer to week 10. He was limited all week in practice, but not ready to go. Darius Davis is also doubtful, not expected to play. Ladd McConkey didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, but was limited on Friday with a hip injury. He is questionable. We'll see about McConkey. But Will Dissly, the tight end that had the 11 targets from Herbert last week, questionable as well. Didn't practice Wednesday, Thursday, limited on Friday. Same situation as McConkey with his shoulder injury. He's a game time decision. I think he'll play. I think Dissly will be available. But Hayden Hurst didn't play last week. It opened the door for Dissly, and I think he'll suit up this week. He was limited Thursday and Friday with a groin injury. He's questionable. I think Hurst will be on the field. But in general, it's just hard to trust anyone in this offense beyond the running backs. Josh Palmer and Will Dissly do gain a little bit of target value. I do trust Palmer a little bit more than previously. In Las Vegas, Aiden O'Connell is on IR, so Gardner Minshew will get the start, but backup quarterback Desmond Ridder might get a few snaps if the Raiders suck in this game. Michael Mayer is out once again, but Jakobi Meyers looks like he returns to the field in this matchup. Questionable still, but limited Wednesday in practice. Didn't practice at all on Thursday, but then on Friday, he was full. So the ankle injury appears to be behind him. It looks like Jakobi Meyers will be good to go. Terrible matchup, though, for him against Trent McDuffie. In Miami, Tyler Huntley is on IR. He will not be available for 4 weeks, but Tua is good to go. He will play. He was full in practice on Thursday and Friday. So that really helps the offense. However, Tyreek Hill is questionable. I'm not convinced he plays because he did not practice on Friday at all with a foot injury that cropped up Thursday. He was downgraded to limited and then didn't practice at all the following day. So I'm very concerned. He's a game time decision, and I don't really feel confident in him being active. So I think Jalen Waddle will get a lot of targets. Even if Tyreek Hill does play, I think he might be more of a decoy some of the time, and Waddle will be the top option. I could see 10 plus targets for Jalen Waddle in this game. So in general, I think Devon Achane is a bit safer. So is Jonnu Smith, and maybe Odell Beckham, Malik Washington have to step up if Tyreek Hill is indeed inactive. But Tua loses a little bit of value. I almost bumped up Tua even higher in the rankings with Tyreek's injury status. I'm not going to do that. That is a bummer for Tyreek Hill. In New England, rookie wide receiver Jalen Polk is out, so maybe a few more targets for guys like Hunter Henry and Demario Douglas. But in New Orleans, Derek Carr, doubtful, not going to play once again. So Spencer Rattler will be the starter, but maybe Taysom Hill gets a few snaps at quarterback. He is active for this game, so he's getting healthier. That's good to see. Same with Chris Olave. He's active off his concussion, and he will be available. We know Rashid Shaheed is not, but Cedric Wilson is out as well. So I think Bub Means is the clear number 2 receiver for the Saints. I don't think you trust him, though, with Rattler at quarterback. In New York for the Jets, Allan Lazard is doubtful. He did not practice at all this week with a chest injury, so not expecting him to play, and that means I think you can trust Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson, and Tyler Conklin a lot more. Lazard wasn't getting a ton of volume, but his role was annoying enough to vulture valuable touchdowns away from other players. So I think you do trust the other Jets receivers a lot more with Lazard unavailable for this game. In Philly, Dallas Goedert is out as expected. Grant Calcaterra gets a slight upgrade, but not enough for me to rank. Devontae might get a little more attention from the defense. In Pittsburgh, rookie wide receiver Roman Wilson didn't practice at all this week. He's doubtful. And so is Cordero Patterson, not expecting him to play with his ankle injury. In Seattle, DK Metcalf is doubtful for this game. So as expected, he will not suit up. And JSN, Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant do benefit, but there is some weather in this game. I'll mention it in a little bit, but we might see Jake Bobo on the field as well. It's possible he gets some reps, but in general, I think Geno Smith loses value. Without DK, he's not as good in fantasy. In Tennessee, Tyjae Spears questionable with a hamstring injury. Limited all week in practice, will be a game time decision, but I do think he plays. Will Levis, though, questionable with a right shoulder injury. Limited all week in practice, a game time decision, and I think he will be the backup. I think he will be available, but I do not think he starts. It's his throwing shoulder. I don't think they risk it. Only in case of emergency will Levis get back on the field. In Washington, Jayden Daniels, probably the most important player of them all, questionable with a rib injury, didn't practice Wednesday, Thursday as expected, but was limited on Friday. He did get some reps in, and he is a game time decision. It's 50-50, but I actually think it's probably going to happen. If I had to bet, I would say Jayden Daniels will play against the Bears, but obviously if he doesn't, Marcus Mariota will be the starter, and I would adjust some of my rankings. I would downgrade Terry McLaurin a few spots if it was Mariota, but my rankings at the moment assume that Daniels will be healthy, so that's what I'm expecting for this game. In San Francisco, Brandin Ayuk was placed on season-ending IR. CMC remains on IR as well, but Jauan Jennings will not play. He is ruled out for this game, second week in a row. Kicker Jake Moody also out still, but Deebo Samuel questionable with that pneumonia will probably play. He was limited on Thursday and Friday, didn't practice Wednesday, and he is trending in the right direction. I think he'll be available, but maybe not 100% in terms of workload. George Kittle, also questionable with a foot injury, didn't practice Wednesday, limited Thursday and Friday, same practice situation as Deebo Samuel. So I think how important they are to the offense. They're not taking any chances, and they're giving them some rest days because they are veterans. So I do think Kittle will be fine. He scored 3 touchdowns against Dallas last year. He really hates them. He will be good. As long as Kittle's available, I still trust Purdy a decent amount. So he'll probably be fine, but without Jauan Jennings, there is another player that needs to step up. So Jacob Coing, Ricky Pearsall, a bit more interesting. My preference would be Coing, but they're both kind of the same in terms of dart throws. Jordan Mason probably gets an upgrade, though. He's full in practice, and they probably lean on him a little bit more, given the injuries to their receiving core. Purdy, though, a bit of a downgrade in general because of no Ayuk rest of season. In Tampa, last team to mention would be the Bucks, where Chris Godwin is on season-ending IR. Mike Evans is out for a few more weeks, but Bucky Irving, I think, will play. That's what the coach sounds optimistic about. It sounds like Bucky Irving, who didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday with a toe injury, will suit up. He was limited on Friday, and they do sound pretty confident he is available. So that really helps their offense a lot, but I do think Rachaad White gains a lot of value. He will catch a lot of targets and probably get more snaps than Bucky straight up. But a lot of targets available for Jalen McMillan and Cade Otton. I think Otton will be their number one receiver in this game. Baker loses value without his top 2 weapons. But that's it for the offensive injuries. There are some defensive and O-line injuries I want to mention as well. In Arizona, there's 4 defensive players that are very important for them that are out. The Cardinals defense is very banged up. So good news for the Miami offense. Even if Tyreek Hill doesn't play, the matchup will be better. In Chicago, safety Jaquan Brisker is out, so that does benefit Terry McLaurin a little bit, maybe a few more targets open down the field, but Jalen Johnson is still a tough matchup. In Dallas, they're still without Micah Parsons and Deron Bland, as well as Phillips. All of them are out. Kalen Carson, another cornerback, was full in practice, expect him to play, and Eric Kendricks also expect him to play. In Houston, they'll be without safety Jimmy Ward, so maybe some deep passes hit for Richardson in this game. The Texans are also without two of their linebackers. They're both doubtful in this game. In the Chargers defense, they have two cornerbacks on IR, including Asante Samuel. Not great for the Chargers. For the Giants, both Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence were questionable but have been removed from the injury report. They will play on Monday night. They're still without Andrew Thomas, their offensive tackle, on IR. In the Jets offense, Elijah Vera Tucker is out on that O-line, but Morgan Moses is questionable. He might be returning to the field. They're also without two safeties, both doubtful. In Seattle, though, they're getting a lot healthier on defense. Their important players are available in Seattle. Lastly, though, in Tennessee, L'Jarius Sneed is out. Their best corner will not be able to play against Amon-Ra St. Brown. That does give you a bit more confidence with Jared Goff, but there's also some weather updates I want to mention. I'm a little bit worried about the Cardinals defense already with some injuries, but the weather will be a factor. It's 83 degrees in Miami on Sunday and 56% humidity. So while it's not the end of the world, it does become a factor in that stadium. The heat gets to the visiting team. It's about 15 degrees cooler on the home sideline than it is on the road. So a little worried about the Cardinals at the end of the game. They might get exhausted because of the heat. In New England, there is a red flag fire warning within 10 miles of Foxborough Stadium. So the air quality might not be its best, but I do think the game will happen. Lastly, though, in Seattle, this one is relevant. The rain is a factor for the Seahawks and the Bills. To start the game, it's an 80% chance of rain, and by the end of the game, it's still up to 50%. So the wind is also 15 miles per hour. Weather will be a legit factor. It might be very ugly in that matchup. It could help the defenses a lot, impact the receivers as well. So those are all of the injury and weather updates this week. Let me get into my final rankings at every position, where we're going to start at running back. That's where I always begin, where I did not change anything inside the top 12. Derrick Henry through James Conner remain locks in your lineup. However, I am downgrading James Cook 4 spots because he's been kind of bad the last 2 games. He missed with an injury 2 weeks ago. He didn't play excellent last week in a blowout. I worry about it a little bit. The weather, I think, could also impact the offense, and it's a bit more crowded with Amari Cooper coming into the fold. Ray Davis has looked better, and I don't think James Cook is 100% healthy. So I think they're going to save him a little bit for the Dolphins game next week. He dominated them back in week 2, and that's why I bumped him down a little bit. He's still in the same tier. I still think James Cook is a player you're starting. But at number 17, he's not as high in the rankings. So Devon Achane, Kareem Hunt, and DeAndre Swift do jump him, but I also downgraded Josh Jacobs 2 spots overall because I worry about the game script going away from him. They get the Lions next week, and against the Jags, they're probably going to be up big. I think in the fourth quarter, they will use Emmanuel Wilson far more than Josh Jacobs just to kill the clock and get out of there with a win. So I think they're going to be looking ahead as well to the division matchup next week, and Jacobs might not get all of those touches in the second half. So he moves down 2 spots. I'm a little more confident in guys like Achane, Kareem Hunt, and DeAndre Swift, mainly because of matchup. Like with Achane, if Tyreek Hill's not available and the Cardinals defense is very injured along with the heat, I think he'll play very well. I do feel very confident in his floor with Tua back. So he moves up. I'm more confident in Achane. Kareem Hunt also gets a great matchup against Las Vegas. That offense is going to play very well this week. So Kareem Hunt, a very safe play. And then DeAndre Swift has played so well this season. I see a lot of volume and effectiveness for Swift. So I still think they're in the same tier, but I'm a little less confident in Jacobs and Cook. Overall, that's why they moved down. Outside the top 20, the first change would be Rachaad White at RB24 now. He moves up 5 spots. I see more volume for him, given the injury to Bucky Irving and the receivers being out. So not the best matchup for him, but he will be very involved. Rachaad White is a very good flex play this week. Tank Bigsby moves down a little bit. I think against the Packers, it's just such a tough matchup, and I'm not totally sure if Etienne will play or not, so a little unsafe. Bigsby's not catching passes either, so downgraded him just barely. But Chase Brown and Bucky Irving do get jumped by Rachaad White That's why they moved down one spot. Overall, I do think Raheem Mostert is a little more valuable as well. Like I was mentioning with A-Chain, if Hill is out or just the matchup looks better with all the injuries on the opposing defense, Mostert is a bit more appealing against the Cardinals at home. So he jumps Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb also moves down behind Tony Pollard, so that's why Pollard moves up. And in general, I did remove Jonathan Brooks. He was previously RB35. So that's why everybody else behind Tyrone Tracy moves up a little bit. But in general, it's not that many differences in my opinion. I did swap Singletary and Etienne. I think Etienne's a little too risky. I'd rather go with Singletary, but at this point, it's pretty risky in the rankings in general. You're probably not starting any of these guys. But if you're super desperate, I did update my ranks outside the top 40, where I do have Emmanuel Wilson as a very interesting flyer as a handcuff. I do think GameScript will benefit him, and they'll ease up on Jacob's workload leading into the Lions game next week. So he's at number 40. Behind him, I have Jalen Warren, Ray Davis, who move up just a little bit. Dearness Johnson, I didn't previously rank. I think he's still kind of interesting. Even if Etienne does play, I still think Dearness could get more touches than him. So now he's ranked. With the weather in Seattle, I bumped up Charbonnet 3 spots. And lastly, I did bump up Jermichael Hasty in the rankings because he's kind of equally as valuable as Antonio Gibson. It's a weird touch split in the Patriots backfield. So he moves up, Jaleel McLaughlin moves down. It's a good matchup for him, but tough to trust with Estime there and Javonte Williams. So those are the updated running back rankings. Now let's pivot to wide receiver, where I made the most changes overall. There were 3 players I already didn't rank back on Wednesday: DK Metcalf, Quentin Johnston, and Adam Thielen. But I also had 4 players that I took out. It would be Jauan Jennings, no longer ranked, same with Diontae Johnson, Allan Lazard, and Jalen Polk. They were kind of on the back half of the rankings in the first place, so it doesn't really impact too many things up at the top. However, I did definitely bump down 3 players due to injury. Deebo Samuel, not as safe with his questionable status. He was in the hospital earlier. I'm not convinced he sees a full workload. So I think I was just too confident in him earlier in the week, previously number 14. He moves down 5 spots, now number 19. I still think you're starting him, but he's a little more risky in general. I also think Tyreek Hill is a lot more risky as well. He might not even play, and even if he does, I do think Waddle will be better. So I previously had him at number 7. He moves down 13 spots overall. At wide receiver 20, he is a lot less safe. But with Tua active, I still think you're probably going to trust his talent. Tyreek still in the top 20. But at number 21, moving down 11 spots, previously number 10, T. Higgins is a very risky bet because of his quad injury. I'm not even convinced he finishes the first quarter or starts the game at all. So T. Higgins, very concerning. I think because he's played so well, you probably still have him in the flex conversation, but I view him the same as Darnell Mooney, Devontae Smith, and a few days ago, I had him as a top 10 option. So really worried about him not finishing the game. It's very risky. I don't feel confident in Higgins' floor in this game. However, above them, I think Jalen Waddle vaults up the rankings. I think he's a must start with Tyreek Hill dealing with a foot injury. He moves up 21 spots. I previously had him at 35. He's now my wide receiver 14, and I think he's a lock in your lineup. I could easily envision 10 plus targets this week against the Cardinals. It's a good matchup. He will be involved, and Waddle has that speed. I think he will take advantage, as Tyreek Hill will not. So everybody from 7 through 17 moves up 1 to 3 spots because those other 3 guys move down, but Jalen Waddle enters the top 15. I think Waddle is now an elite start in week 8 with Tyreek Hill dealing with a foot injury. Outside the top 20, the players moving up are mainly because of other players moving down. For instance, Tyler Lockett and JSN move down 10 spots overall because of the weather in Seattle. I do not feel confident that Geno Smith gets them the ball efficiently in the first place. I don't think both of them score touchdowns. And now the weather will definitely pivot away from throwing the ball at all. So I really worry about it. I don't think they're safe top 25 options anymore. I think they're low-end flex plays. The volume should be there, at least 8 or 9 targets apiece, but I don't think they're going to be as catchable, and I feel like it's just not as safe of a projection. So worried about the rain, I'm downgrading Lockett and JSN by a total of 10 spots. I'm also downgrading Zay Flowers 10 spots with his injury designation. I don't think he's a safe play to start, and even if he does, it's a tough matchup. I worry he's not 100%. So Zay Flowers moving down 10 spots himself, right above Rashad Bateman. If Flowers doesn't play, I would keep Bateman right here because the matchup gets more difficult against Denzel Ward. I would still be counting on that deep touchdown to hit. So Bateman still has the same role, still has the same risk. Not many changes for Bateman, but Flowers far less safe, moves down 10 spots overall. You can bench Flowers, I think, with a lot more certainty in this matchup. I also downgraded Chris Olave 2 spots because of the pivot to Spencer Rattler. He's now wide receiver 25, but kind of the same as previously. Not much changes in my opinion on Chris Olave, but that's why Darnell Mooney, Devontae Smith, DeAndre Hopkins, Amari Cooper, Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison, Tank Dell, and Romeo Doubs all move up between 2 to 4 spots because those other players I just mentioned do move down. I'm just less confident in those guys, not more confident in these players moving up. I also swapped Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. I think Sutton is a bit safer than Jeudy because Cedric Tillman is legit. Tillman had 12 targets last week, and I think I was kind of discounting him a little bit too much earlier in the rankings. I ranked him at 54. Now I think I should have him back-to-back with Jeudy because not only is the matchup elite, but Tillman was way more involved than Jeudy last week. I think the contract is the only thing telling me to trust Jeudy a little bit more, but talent could win out. Tillman is still on his rookie deal, so the contract is kind of irrelevant. If he's the better player, he will get more targets from Jameis Winston. So kind of want to see it before I fully trust it, but I do think Jeudy and Tillman are on equal footing. They could both take this job outright for themselves. So we're going to find out what happens. It's a great matchup against the Ravens. They do have some flex appeal. I was too low on Tillman back on Wednesday, but I do think Coing and Pearsall are more valuable with no Jauan Jennings. One of them will step up. However, it could be a big split between both players. I prefer Coing, who's practiced way more with Brock Purdy this year. Pearsall still kind of getting his feet under him, but I think they're both pretty equal in terms of value. If I was picking between the two, I would go Coing just barely. But I think they're a little safer than Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman, who I did downgrade 8 spots overall. Because of the weather, I worry about this offense putting up elite numbers like it did last week. So they're not as safe. I trust Cooper a lot more. These two are a big gamble. One of them might play well. The other is not that safe, and it could pivot between either any given week. That's why I have them back to back and downgraded 8 overall spots this week. I also downgraded Jalen Tolbert a little bit as some other players jump him, but Demario Douglas also gets jumped. Josh Palmer, I swapped with Ladd McConkey. I would definitely prefer Palmer as the top Chargers receiver this week, but Jakobi Meyers in a terrible matchup, I do think I was a little too high on. I think he's going to be very, very bad against the Chiefs and Trent McDuffie. But inside the top 60, outside the top 50, I did upgrade Xavier Legette 10 spots, previously unranked. He's a little more interesting as the number 1 receiver in Carolina this week, but terrible matchup with Bryce Young. I don't trust him. I also upgraded Watson and Wicks a little bit, given it's a weird matchup. It could randomly pivot to one of them, but Wandale gets jumped. Keenan moves up 1 spot because Ladd McConkey moves down 8 spots. I'm very worried about McConkey and his hip injury, but Andre Yoshivas at 57 does enter the rankings. And if you told me that T. Higgins doesn't even play at all, I would bump up Yoshivas to probably right behind Cedric Tillman. I think he'd be in the same range, top 40, around Calvin Ridley, Michael Pittman. Good upside for him, good role available, but he's still a backup receiver. Kind of hard to fully trust, but the touchdown probably is there for Yoshi. So he's an interesting dart throw, but at 57, assuming T. Higgins plays, you probably keep him outside of the lineup. Lastly, though, inside the top 60, Alec Pierce, Khalif Raymond, and Tim Patrick move up 1 spot overall. So those are the updates to wide receiver. However, I'm going to just show you the top 20 quarterbacks, tight ends, and defenses here on the screen because inside the top 20, I didn't make any changes at quarterback at all. Quarterback is all the same. So if you watch my video on Friday, all of my takes are staying put. I also didn't change anything at tight end, at least inside the top 20. I did bump up Mike Gesicki above Hayden Hurst. He now cracks the top 25, but not a player you're starting. In the top 20, it does remain the same. At defense, it's not big enough of a change to mention on its own. So here it is. The Bills and Seahawks with the weather. I did upgrade 5 spots. They're now inside the top 16. Both of them are interesting plays because of all the rain. Their defense does get a slight increase in value. That game will probably be a lot closer than previously expected. So those are the changes at those three positions, but at flex, here are the top 40 at running back and wide receiver. I feel very good about the top 15 running backs this week. I think you're getting at least 15 plus points from all of them. Really good value at that position. And then the backups, the running back twos and flex plays, I think all the way until Bucky Irving at 29, I think are all pretty legit. I would expect at least 9-10 points from them as well. I think running back is very deep this week thanks to no teams on bye, as well as some healthy players getting back on the field, like Taylor especially. So running back is pretty solid, but I think starting with like Najee Harris, Rashad White, Rico Dowdle, all the way through Bucky Irving, we're in the flex conversation. And at wide receiver, I feel really good about the top 17 all the way through Davante Adams. I would expect 15 plus points as well. With McLaurin through Romeo Dobbs, I think you're getting very good wide receiver 2 high-end flex plays. And then starting with Lockett through, I think, Cedric Tillman, I think those are the only players I would consider as more desperate options at flex. I think the wide receiver 31 through 40 are a little dicey in general. But that's going to be it for those rankings. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer them. But before I go, I am making one change to my picks against the spread. You probably think I'm changing my picks straight up. My win-loss picks, you probably think I'm at least picking Atlanta over Tampa Bay. But I am not. I'm not changing a single thing. I was tempted to do that, but I'm not going to do it. I did pick the Bucks before Godwin and Evans did go down, but it's just such an important game for Tampa, and Baker, I think, is the better quarterback. I think they find a way, their defense steps up, and in a close game at home, they do tough it out. I will stick with Tampa Bay. I don't feel great about it, but I'm going to trust my gut. I think it'll be close. Give me the Bucks at home to win. I'm also tempted to take the Seattle Seahawks in an upset over Buffalo, especially getting the wind and the rain to help out. There is a chance this gets ugly, but without DK Metcalf, I'm not going to bet against Josh Allen. They might look ahead to the Dolphins game next week, but I still think the Buffalo Bills will win in Seattle. So not changing a thing in terms of my win-loss picks straight up, but against the spread, I am removing the Saints plus 7.5. With their backup quarterback, I just don't trust them as much. I thought Derek Carr would be on the field, so it is more than a touchdown. It's very tempting, but I'm going to avoid it. And I'm going to swap this Saints pick with the Colts plus 5. I think the Colts can win straight up, but in division against a heated rival, they barely lost in week 1. I think they can get at least within 5 points. I think at least they're going to cover the spread, but I do think they could win straight up. So give me the Colts plus 5 instead of the Saints plus 7.5. And then I'm also going to make this easier on myself. The line has changed on the Packers game. I still think they win comfortably, and I previously gave you the Packers minus 5.5. The line is down to 4. Give me the Packers minus 4. I am updating that pick. So I was right about the Rams already, but give me the Packers minus 4, Chiefs minus 9.5, the Cowboys plus 5.5, the Browns plus 10. That one feels kind of stupid, but I'm still going to take it. And then the Colts plus 5. I think they can win straight up. I was tempted to go Seattle plus 3, but that one is a little too risky. I will ignore it. Same with the Bucks plus 2.5. I'll just leave those. Those picks are not the safest in general. So that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I wish you luck in week 8. And as always, if you have any questions, let me know down below. I'll be happy to answer them. Until next time, though, my name is Adam Riancho. I will see you next time. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.